Hello, how are you? Welcome not to my car. It's very calm in my office right now. Wow. I can see why people like coming in here and chilling out. Um, I wanted to discuss briefly something that, for me, is one of the key points to understanding a lot of these manifesting ideas. And it has to do with our imagination. I want to talk about it briefly because I've been seeing quite a few comments on my channel about people like not grasping like what Coué is saying about the imagination and about willpower, and people being confused by what Emile Coué is saying. And for people who are new to my channel, I thought it might be worthwhile just to say this, brief overview of what I think Coué is getting at and what I also think Neville's getting at. What I think a lot of these great law of assumption type of teachers are getting at. And that is that our imagination is a dominating force in our life. According to Emile Coué, according to Neville, according to most of these great, manifesting teachers from the last century that we talk about all the time on this channel, the imagination is a much more powerful force than, normal society, normal culture gives it credit for being. That's not to say that people don't think that our imagination is powerful, right? It's just folks like Coué and Neville say, no, it's you're way undervaluing it. Neville went so far as to say, you're all imagination. But what people, I think, don't understand a lot of the time when it comes to discussing these ideas and working with your imagination is this point. And it's, I think, hugely important to understand. This is it. Your imagination is often working against you. Your imagination is often working against you. Now, you can argue with that. You can say that's not true in my situation. You can say I've mastered my mind, mastered my imagination. And you might be right. I hope you are right. But the proof is in the pudding. And from what I see, people aren't being honest when they say they've mastered their imagination or that they have this incredibly positive, life-giving outlook. People are full of shit when they say that most of the time. They're lying to themselves. The goal, practically speaking, is to have a sense of direction, a sense of control with your imagination. To be able to direct the imagination as you want. To have it so that your willpower and your conscious effort is aligned with your imagination. And not having the two oppose each other. Which is what Coué called the law of reversed effort, where you consciously are trying to do something. You're trying to will something into being, but your imagination is saying this is not going to happen. That's what you don't want. It's the law of reversed effort in action. What you want is your will, your effort, to be aligned with what you're imagining. I'm going to get this. This wonderful thing is going to happen. Isn't it wonderful? But most people say, isn't it wonderful? And then a couple minutes later, they're cursing at something, angry at something. And it's not wonderful at all. Neville mentioned this all the time. Joseph Murphy did too. We're talking about being in these, high state of euphoria, and then 10 minutes later, we're kicking the dog. This is the real work. Is working with your imagination and becoming more friendly with it so it works with you better. It's common here. That's what's always interested me about these ideas, is how can I work with myself so that my imagination is more aligned with my rational thinking positively. I used to say often, I think I even mentioned this in Relax More, Try Less, which I wrote way back in 2015. How my thoughts would seemingly become negative out of nowhere, or I'd start to feel bad out of nowhere. And it seemed just like the body doing its thing. It seemed just so random. But the longer I have been into these ideas, the more I don't think it's random usually. It's because the imagination is fast. And when you all of a sudden start thinking a series of bad thoughts, or all of a sudden feel very uncomfortable, it's because your imagination is working against you. It's subtle. Subtle. In our imagination, really, in practical terms, we could look at it as just like quiet, subtle thoughts. Subconscious thoughts are subtle, quiet thoughts we have, and they pass through so quickly in our mind that we hardly notice them, but they leave an imprint. And that imprint is often negative and not what we want. So little things can throw us off. We can be having a good day, things are wonderful, and then we, happen to see a headline of a magazine, and it makes us think of something discouraging, and we hardly process it in our awareness, but it was there. We process it a little bit, we bought into it a little bit, and it sets off a quiet chain of imaginative shame, anger, fear, whatever it may be. Little things can cause imaginative doubt. And this is the work. It's like noticing that more and being like, oh, that's interesting. How can I withdraw from that? Imaginative fear, imaginative doubt, imaginative shame. Coué described the imagination, he compared it to like a wild torrent, right, of water coming into a town. It could flood the entire town. But if, you learn how to irrigate that water, well, then it will provide water and irrigation for the whole town. Or he said the imagination is like a wild horse that can throw you and kill you if you try to ride it. But if we domesticate the horse, we can ride it and make it of good use. This is the work. So yeah, I thought I would just remind people who've been here for a while about that. And if you're new here and you've been hearing a lot of positive talk about the imagination, I want you to remember the dark side too. Because once we acknowledge both the light and the dark, we can work more holistically with it. And we can integrate the reactivity that we have in a more healthy way. So if you have questions for me or would like coaching on this subject, be glad to answer your questions or to have a phone conversation with you. I can be reached at info@radicalcounselor.com.